afternoon, evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cities on the Frontline Speaker Series session on urban flood resilience, tackling flood risk and inequality in cities. I'm Lynette Lim, Global Director of Communications and Knowledge from the Resilient Cities Network. Cities on the Frontline is a virtual thought leadership series featuring solutions by cities for cities. Now, it began in 2020 through a partnership between the Resilient Cities Network and the World Bank Group's City Resilience Program. The series provides city practitioners and the industries and residents that they support with a platform for knowledge exchange. Today's session of the Cities on the Frontline Speaker Series is hosted with the support of the World Bank's Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery and the City Resilience Program. Now, before we start, let me remind everyone of the intentions of this speaker series and the ground rules for the conversation today. Now, the purpose of these global webinars is to have an open and honest learning conversation. As such, we ask you not to attribute any comments unless you have the person's express permission to do so, and we can help you to obtain this permission if needed. Today, we're proud to have nearly 1,000 registered participants for the call. And so to facilitate this discussion, we ask you to write your questions on the Q&A function of Zoom. We also welcome you to introduce yourself over the chat function. Please note that, of course, the recording of this session, as well as the summary and the presentation material, will be posted online and on our website in the days after the session. Today, I'm also delighted to be co-hosting the session with Ming Zhang from the World Bank. Ming, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Lynette, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone connected from around the world. I'm Ming Zhang. I'm Global Director for Urban Disaster Risk Management and the Land at the World Bank. It's a pleasure to participate in this critical discussion on urban flood resilience and how we can better adapt to and reduce flood risks in our cities. Urban areas are increasingly prone to flooding due to climate change, rapid urbanization, and inadequate stormwater management. Even last week, central France saw its worst flooding in 40 years. This summer, the city of Vienna saw its worst floods in 152 years. And in Eastern Africa, flooding and the landslides affected almost 1 million people in Burundi, Kenya, Somalia, and Tanzania. According to a World Bank study, globally, 1.81 billion people, equivalent to 23% of the world population, are directly exposed to 1 in 100-year flood event, posing significant risks to lives and livelihoods, forcing schools to close, people to move, and leading to severe health risks. Through today's session, we want to start a discussion with you on 2 questions. Why is urban flooding a critical concern, and what can cities do about it? Now, before handing over to our panelists, I would like to use this opportunity to highlight 2 points that are critical for this discussion. First is the continued importance of urban flood resilience in the global development agenda. One of the key challenges that cities face in meeting their climate goals is the availability of technical assistance and the climate financing. That is why in 2017, with the support of the Austrian Federal Ministry of Finance, BMF, and the Swiss Secretary of Economic Affairs, SECO, at the World Bank, we established the City Resilience Program, CRP, and I would like to thank them once more for their support and the great collaboration. The City Resilience Program, CRP, is a global program that helps cities protect themselves against the adverse impact of disaster risks and climate change. Through our World Bank teams, cities can call on the CRP to assist them in assessing their climate and disaster vulnerabilities, plan for increased urban resilience, and find innovative ways for sustainable financing for investment in cities that enhance resilience. To date, the program has engaged with 92 countries and hundreds of cities around the world on developing investment programs that can be funded with a range of financial instruments. The second point I would like to highlight is the urgency of mitigating and adapting to the severe rise in urban flooding and its risk multiplying impacts on the most vulnerable people. Many of these effects take place in large urban centers where the cost, scale, and the complexity of climate crisis are only going to increase. One lesson is clear, is the need for longer-term planning, concerted efforts, and the critical importance to work alongside poverty alleviation efforts and social inclusion in order to save lives and strengthen resilience of communities repeatedly hit by disaster risks. Less than a month ago, I actually was pleased to meet some of the participants here and share some of CRP's work at the Livable Cities Academy on integrated urban flood risk management in Cape Town, South Africa. And that event exemplified our emphasis as a knowledge bank to achieve development impact and protect cities from flooding. We need to put cutting-edge knowledge and the tools in the hands of those people best placed to tackle disasters. To share some of this knowledge from the global experience and the distinguished partners, today we have gathered 3 experts in urban flood resilience from 3 different continents. So joining today, we have Anna Campos. She's a lead disaster risk management specialist at the World Bank, based in Washington, D.C. As the regional coordinator for disaster risk management in East Africa, she plays a strategic role in leading and supporting teams working across resilience and disaster risk management in relation to territorial development, urban and coastal resilience, and institutional and policy strengthening. We also have Dr. Clemens Neuhold. He is the Deputy Director of the Flood Risk Management Directorate in the Austrian Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions, and Water Management. He is responsible for the implementation of EU Floods Directive in Austria at the national level, as well as for international coordination. He's based in Vienna. And then we also have engineer Humphrey Kanyeye. He's manager of urban roads and project coordinator for the World Bank program and the Tanzania Rural and Urban Roads Agency under the President's Office, Regional Administration and the Local Government based at Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. With that said, let me hand over to Anna Campos for her presentation.
Thank you very much, Ming, for the warm welcome. And it is a pleasure for me to be here sharing the experience of what the World Bank is doing in flood risk management and how we are focusing on fostering green resilience and inclusive cities. As Ming mentioned, 25% of the population global-wide is exposed to floods. And over the last 30 years, flood events have caused cumulative global economic losses of more than 1.2 trillion. This means that floods continue to affect more people than any other hazards. And floods is also the most frequent event global-wide. If this tendency keeps growing, it's expected a 10-fold increase in global flood damages by 2050. Around the world, cities are expanding rapidly, both in terms of population and footprint. It is expected that 70% of the global population will live in urban areas by 2050, which means that there will be 2.5 billion new urban dwellers by the same time. But as city grows, so does risk, and risky growing is outpacing safe growth. So according with some World Bank studies, rapid urbanization has led to sediments expanding into high-risk flood areas, especially in low and middle-income countries. Since 1985, urban growth in very high-risk areas has expanded by at least 50% more than in safer zones. So to tackle these flood risk challenges, what we should do, we should to understand the different contributing factors, how the increasing frequency and intensity of events exacerbated by climate change is increasing the hazards, how urbanization is increasing the growing number of people, property, and assets located in urban areas, increasing exposure. And there is an increasing vulnerability because of the lack of adequate planning, design, construction, and maintenance, and also due to different social economical factors. So for local governments, these factors point to the necessity of properly managing urban growth. Where do we begin? Basically, by understanding the types of flooding, we have, according with the water sources, the characteristics of the topography, and the speed of the water, we have different types of floods: river or fluvial floods, coastal floods, pluvial floods, flash floods. All of those have different impacts and require slightly different technical approaches. Also, by conducting flood risk assessments that need to be accurate, reliable, and actionable. The accurate representation of the terrain is essential for predicting flood extents, depths, as well as for understanding how water will move across the landscape. A progressive approach could be very cost efficient, using global flood data for preliminary screening, intermediate to high resolution satellite information for project preparation, LiDAR, drones, and detailed engineering and probabilistic models for project designs. This involves quantifying flood risk by integrating different return periods, considering future scenarios and uncertainties as urbanization and climate change. Community and stakeholders play a crucial role in both identifying the challenges and the solutions. Engineering engaging different stakeholders ensure realistic understanding of the problems and locally aligned solutions leading to more sustainable outcomes. How we use these flood risk assessments to promote urban resilience solutions? First, flood assessments are the base for integrated flood risk management plans, which should contain a mix of structural and non-structural measures to assure that we are covering all floods, all the challenges addressed by floods. This includes reducing flood hazard by promoting wetlands and green infrastructure, building gray infrastructure for flood protection, land use planning, and managing emergency and residual risk through insurance. Second, cities should include this integrated flood risk management plan into their urban instruments as the strategic planning, the spatial planning, and financial planning, assuring that these climate resilience plans and these flood resilience plans are not standing in shells and not integrated to the investments that the cities are conducting or to the strategic development goals that the city have. But let me zoom in how we incorporate this in urban planning. Flood risk assessments should be the key for identifying the areas that should be restricted, conditioned, or promoted according with the level of risk and the possibility of mitigating this risk. For this, we have different instruments as zoning regulations, development control, building regulations, financial incentives, and disincentives. How we are approaching this from the infrastructure point of view, making more integrated solutions that combine traditional gray infrastructure with blue and green infrastructure. That should be the new normal to make more efficient investments. Our portfolio in the Global Bank globally has grown since 2012 to 2022 in 7.6 billion investments, including nature-based solutions for integrating flood risk management. Also, this should include optimizing environmental and social factors for successful project implementation, managing land availability for the construction of flood control measures, managing in a sensitive way resettlement and vulnerable groups, and including protection areas for conserving environmentally sensitive areas. Solid waste and liquid waste is always a big challenge that requires also a very careful attention, and that is normally a joint problem that we should target when we are managing a flood. But operations and maintenance is always the elephant in the room. Unfortunately, our cities consider the investments that are needed for the capital cost, but not the operation and maintenance elements that are required. So we need to define roles, responsibilities, budgets, and consider that all type of measures, even gray, green, and blue infrastructure requires maintenance costs, and that this cost can have in a lifetime an approximate value of 20 to 80%, depending on the complexity of the different type of measures and the levels of operations that we are requiring for this process. So the time to act is now. We should work together with national governments, local governments, civil defenses, and urban planners to build the resilience that the cities require, constructing a long-term vision, defining high-level commitments at the government level, starting with the flood risk assessments to identify the essential priorities and interventions, considering that land use plan and early warning systems are low-cost wins, while green and gray infrastructure investments require more resources but provide long-term resilience benefits. So thank you very much. And we will hear later one of the examples of what the World Bank has been supporting in Tanzania, and that will be presented later by Humphrey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that perspective on global trends as well as solutions. Now, as a reminder to all of our attendees, please feel free to drop in any questions you may have into the Q&A function of Zoom. Now, for an institutional perspective on how to respond and adapt, I'm going to turn the floor to our second speaker, Clemens Neuhold, Deputy Director of the Flood Risk Management Directorate at the Austrian Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions, and Water Management. Clemens, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Hello and good afternoon from Vienna, Austria. I just want to give you a slight overview on what we are doing in the Austrian, but also in the EU perspective. And I was very happy to hear by Anna that so many things are covered also in the global perspective. So we try to have the same approach here in Austria. Just to give you some facts and figures on a rather small country in the center of Europe, Austria covers 84,000 square kilometers, and very special about that is that there is a broad variety in landscapes, which also poses different challenges when it comes to flood risk management, as we have to deal with torrential floods and also floods in low-lying areas, which are mainly pluvial floods then in the end. A very special also about Austria is that we are very rich in water resources. So therefore, we rather know or think to know how to deal with some of these processes in the end. Flood protection and flood risk management in the end changed a lot over the years, and it changes more or less with the priorities set by the time where we live in, but also by the society itself. After World War II, food security and land drainage was of highest priority in Austria. So therefore, the structural protection of arable land and settlements was in focus. But when it came to severe flood events in the 60s, a rethinking started to take over in not only in Austria, but in Central Europe. And we recognize that not only flood protection is the right way, but also we have to think about environment and nature-oriented flood management. But this again was overwhelmed by events in 2002 and 2005 over broad parts in Europe, which showed us again that this is not enough. So we also have to consider other sectors such as land use planning, building regulation, and many, many more to make sure that all resources are being catched for the overarching goal of risk reduction, to make sure that the awareness is there, that residual risk is discussed about, and an integrated flood risk management approach is being applied. For Austria, we developed some basic principles, whereas sound planning is the first step on implementing flood protection measures. So you can see here more simplified planning approaches on a catchment scale and very detailed plannings on the local scale. We then think and learned by the recent flood events that retention, restoration, and nature-based solutions are of highest priority, and they have to be given priority over structural measures, because not only flood protection is covered by these kind of measures, but they also develop multi-benefits with respect to environmental goals, but also recreation and biodiversity. We have a very clear setup how to come from a first idea to the implementation of measures. We have a strong institutionalization of the intersectoral coordination, and also the participation of the public and interested parties. And we also have the obligation to inform the people who are facing flood risk by our planning and in the frame of our implementation processes. Now coming to Vienna, it was mentioned by Ming already that Vienna faced a severe flood event a month ago. This is a very special case study, let's call it like that, in Austria. It's the capital. It covers more than a third of people living in Austria. And there is the big lifeline across Europe, but also across Austria, the Danube River, which is the second longest river in Europe. Its mean discharge is 2,000 cubic meters a second, which is not too much, but when it comes to 100 years flood event, we are talking about 10,600 cubic meters a second, which have to be protected against, because Vienna is a very densely populated area. Coming back to the recent flood event a month ago in September 2024, this was a long-lasting low-pressure system coming from the Mediterranean. We already had comparable situations in 2002 and 2013, from which we learned a lot. Therefore, also we experience a rather decrease in direct damages in this historic comparison of the flood events. But nevertheless, there were 9 casualties, which is a lot for an Austrian flood event. And we have estimated, we are at the beginning of the documentation and estimation of the damages, which are rather in the billions than in the high millions euro range. You can see here the center of the weather phenomena, which led to up to 400 millimeters of precipitation there, which in the end caused flood events for the dark red dots with a recurrence interval lower than 100 years flood. So it's in the Viennese area, we are talking about a 1,000 years flood, which has to be dealt with. How do we structure our flood risk management approach to try to reduce flood risks at best at possible? We already saw that we try to implement multi-benefit measures. Especially also we are trying this in densely populated and urban areas. We have, especially in the urban surrounding, numerous contradicting or parallel interests to be managed. We are looking for win-win solutions for flood protection, nature conservation, recreation, biodiversity. And we are aware and learned that flood risk management means an intersectoral coordination of numerous sectors, where I want to especially mention spatial planning and building regulation, but also the emergency management sector, who has a big impact on the number of casualties and a big impact on the direct damages that we have to see after events. You can see here on the left-hand side, this is the Viennese River, which faced a 1,000 years flood a month ago. We were happy that no severe damages occurred there, because there is a retention area in the upper part of the catchment before the river enters Vienna. You can see this retention area in the center down of this slide. Yeah, we just have some structural damages there. The metro, which is going parallel to the river, has to be closed for 3 days, but that's it. And for a 1,000 years floods event, that's really a very good result. You can see here the nature-based solutions along the Danube River itself. So we try to get rid of hard structures along the river banks. And a very special thing I want to come to as well is the so-called Danube Island. That's the picture on the far right. And I will have a last slide on this again. You can see here the historical situation of the Danube River on the left side. The river used to take roughly 100 kilometers in breadth to Phuket there. Then we had to regulate it because of the urban setting. You can see this in the center, the picture. And the Danube Island was built in the 1970s, 80s to enable flood protection against roughly 5,000 years flood event in the city of Vienna. You can see this is a measure with aims for multiple benefits, especially for recreation, but also for some areas and habitats for different species. That's a picture of 2013. This is a 300 years flood event in the city of Vienna. You can see the UN building over here, and the island still is not fully covered by water. So this, I think, is a very special solution and a kind of expensive solution, but a very efficient solution in the end, because there had not been any casualties during this flood event in Vienna. Thanks for your attention, and yeah, I'll stay in the call.
Thank you, Clemens, for that presentation on how Vienna has responded and adapted to imminent flood risk. I'm pleased also to introduce now our final speaker, Humphrey Kanyenye, Manager of Urban Roads and Project Coordinator for the World Bank Programs at the Tanzania Rural and Urban Roads Agency under the President's Office, Regional Administration and Local Government, who will be sharing today some perspectives on successful partnerships in the waste and flood nexus. Humphrey, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Some of us who are far west. So my name is Humphrey Kanyenye from Tanzania. As introduced by colleagues, I'm going to present to you a project which goes by the name of Msimbazi Basin Development Project. It's an urban flood resilience project, and probably in the coming slides, you will understand much better. So So for those who do not know where Dar es Salaam is, it's in Tanzania. And if you look at the map, the blue part is the CBD area of Dar es Salaam. And the green one is the area where the lower Msimbazi Basin is. And if you look at the lower picture on your right, it's a map that shows the river that brings all the water down to the ocean. And the area that I've shown you with the green is the area which is the lowest part. It's the lowest point of the river. So all the water that comes from around 40 kilometers, all the way from the hills, comes down into pond in this area. So, and you can also see some tributaries. They also contribute into the water that contributes to flooding in the lower part of the river. And the reason, the factors that are really attributing to this flooding is because of the climate change that we all know. We have been experiencing a lot of rain in the past 10 years. And also there is a lot of development within the streams. People have built, and there is a lot of social and economic activities going on along there. So runoff has been increasing significantly, causing flooding downstream. And also there is the issue of deforestation. We had a lot of trees upstream. People have cut all the trees, and now that has also contributed into the increased runoff. Sorry, can you help me with the next slide? Yeah. So the picture on your left is the situation during dry season, and on your right is during flooding. It's very easy to understand, right? And down there is actually what we want the area to be after completion of the project. And the objective of this project is to mitigate the flood risks that has been occurring in the area and minimize the impacts of flooding. And also, we are looking at changing this area from being an hazardous area into both economic and social opportunity area. Next slide, please. How do I move? Yeah. So some current challenges are more on the traffic and mobility, because one of the roads that crosses the river is the main trunk road of the city. It brings more than 30% of traffic into the CBD, and during rain season, this road has to be closed. And when you close, they have to find alternative ways or alternative routes to various roads within the city to reach the CBD. And now you can imagine how chaotic it is when these vehicles choose other routes over this route. So that is one. And the second thing is the community healthy, livability and safety, which is really something that everyone would understand. Like, now look at the water, and this water is contaminated with some other sewer systems. Health-wise, it's very risky, but also having this a lot of water, it's also possible for kids to be drawn in. And therefore, it really jeopardizes the safety of the kids and even some people, especially people with disabilities living in the area. So the whole thing is the environment is not livable when the rain comes. And you also look at the solid waste all along the river. People have been dumping their solid waste. So it's something that will be dealt with during implementation of the project. And all this solid waste comes down into this area here where there is a bridge, and some bridges are very small. They have a very small capacity to accommodate all the water that comes from upstream. And also looking at the sediments, there's a lot of erosion upstream that comes with all the sediments comes and stay near here at the lower part of the river. And also we have environmental issues, which are more of mangrove that has to be protected. Next, please. Yeah, but we have a solution. We have a project that is financed by the World Bank, and it's a credit, $200 million US. And we have 30 million US dollars, which is also a loan from the Spanish government. And we also have 30 million euro as a grant from the Netherlands government. So all this money together, 260 million, brings in a solution to overcome the challenge that we are facing. Yeah. So we engaged CDR International, a company from the Netherlands, to do a comprehensive study on what exactly can be done to mitigate the impacts that we are facing in the area. And this came up with a lot of alternative solutions. And among them, we picked this one, which is more, we think it's a more efficient and it will really solve the problem. And here I will speak about the infrastructure, which is more of a flood control interventions. I will speak about the resilient transport infrastructure. I will also speak about the flood resistant city park, urban redevelopment, and watershed management. Can you go please to next? Yes. So basically what we are doing, we are excavating, we are widening the river and deepening it to increase its capacity. And all the excavated material, we expect to have about 1.4 million cubic meters of excavated material that will be used to fill the area adjacent to the river. And from there, we are going to make some terraces. The terraces will be three. One will be the flood-prone terrace, and we're going to have a lower terrace and the upper terrace. Looking at the first one is the normal one, when we have normal rainfall. So we excavate to an extent that all the water that comes in can be accommodated in. And then we have also estimated a 10-year rain event that will also be accommodated within the, we have 3 terraces, but the floodplain terraces has also its own terraces. Yeah. So the first one is the 10-year event rain, and the second one is a 100-year rain event. So by doing so, we have accepted living with the flooding. We know there will always be flooding, but we have done in such a way that this water will always be accommodated within the floodplain area. Next, please. Yeah, so to summarize what I've said in the previous slide, this is what we are having. So we have the floodplain, which will accommodate up to 100-year return period rain event, and then we have the lower terrace, which we are going to construct. It's kind of a city park. So one of the biggest city parks in Tanzania that we are going to do. But this city park can also be inundated in times of extreme events. Yeah. But in the other hand, we have managed to get a space or a land on the higher terrace that can be redeveloped. Yeah. So this is the solution that we have chosen. And also we are going to construct a new bridge. And we just signed a contract 2 days ago. A bridge that has a length of 390 meters and will be raised to 13.5 meters. And we have tested even a 1,000 return period. And the results has come that this bridge will also will still accommodate all the water, even a 1,000 rain event. Next, please. So this is the city park. I've mentioned it already. Can you go? Yep. And also, so the higher terrace is what we are going to have a riverfront development or regeneration opportunity. And we have done so to have a value capture opportunity to recoup the costs and to cross-subsidize the ongoing river management and social needs. So it will also catalyze the economic growth in the urban core. Thanks again. And also I mentioned about the deforestation. We are going to provide the watershed management by planting trees and manage solid waste. We'll make sure that erosion is controlled, and also restoration of mangrove in the downstream. Okay. Can you go ahead? The next, yeah. So we have compensated more than 2,775 people in the area because they had to vacate the area. Yeah. Next. And also we are going to establish an institution that will be managing the area, because otherwise, if we don't have an institution, the situation will still go back and we will have the same problem in the future. So we have agreed with the government to establish this institution that will be kind of an Msimbazi planning authority, and will be also the institution that will be harnessing the revenues to make sure all the operation and maintenance are obtained, so that we sustain the river basin. Next, please. And we have also estimated some where we can get the money. We look at the land sales, we look at the property taxes, because of the area that you have mentioned, 57 hectares, that will be redeveloped to real estates. Then that is where we are going to get some money that will help us in the maintenance, operation and maintenance of the river. And on your right, there's a table that shows the units that we have established for redevelopment of the real estates in the area. Okay. And these are the parcels that we have established within the 57 hectares. And the development would vary depending on the needs and the surrounding need of the area. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to all our panelists for the really very nice presentations. And we have also very active participation from the participants. And actually, we are being a little bit flooded with questions, and I don't think we will have enough time to answer all the questions. So I think what we will do is maybe we'll pick one question each for the three panelists before we close the session. So maybe I'll start. I'll pick the question, I think, from the Q&A for Anna. The question is about the informal settlements, how they contribute to the flood. I think from the question, what are the examples of building capacity for the informal settlements, and quite often the flood in many countries. Here, the example, for example, Bihor in Philippines. Most affected are the informal settlements, both in terms of housing and livelihood. How do we address the informal settlements relationship with the flood? Anna, to you, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Ming, and thanks for the question. I think the example that we just saw for Tanzania is a very good example, and I think it's the case in most of our developing countries, I mean, in Africa and around the world. No, people doesn't have other options to settle in the land that is along the rivers, or it has not been occupied by other people because probably it's susceptible to different type of floods. So in that sense, it's the case everywhere that we make an intervention that we have informal settlements located in flood-prone areas. So as mentioned during the presentation and the examples, the first is to make the right studies to understand the type of flood, the recurrency, and the impact that this can have in the infrastructure and in the people. Try to identify the mitigation options and try to reduce the risk as much as possible. But there are some times that there is no option, and the cost-benefit analysis for the mitigation cost doesn't really allow to maintain some of those people in those areas. So we keep the people in the areas where the risk can be mitigated, and the rest, a resettlement plan is prepared between the government with the support of the bank to identify those people that have to be compensated and have to be kind of moved to safer areas. So the idea is always to have the best information, try to reduce risk before deciding on resettling people. And if there is not really a mitigation option that it has a cost-benefit ratio that is sustainable, the last option will be the resettlement. So in that sense, in the informal settlements, it is a combination of improving some of the context with mitigation works, nature-based solutions, improving housing, and resettlement as a last option, the people that is needed.
Thank you, Anna. The next question is for Clemens. Following the recent disastrous floods in Austria, where do you see the benefits and limitations of nature-based solutions for flood protection? Now, NBS was highlighted as a key answer in the media, but how, if possible, would you quantify the potential of such solutions? And do we have to rethink spatial planning approaches with increasing extreme events in the climate change context?
Thanks for the question, which is more or less 5 questions in the end. I think when it comes to nature-based solutions, we have to distinguish between urban nature-based solutions, where we are talking about sponge cities or little areas to retain water. I think these kind of measures do have impact on microclimatic conditions in the cities, on heat and so on. But for a flood event, as we've experienced it months ago, the capacity to hold back water is very, very limited, because the soil, especially in the urban surrounding, is saturated very quickly. Nevertheless, they have important impacts on the way of life in a city, I would say. Other nature-based solutions or natural water retention measures without the urban context are able to provide a significant impact on the reduction of flood risk. As we've experienced it so many times in Austria, in smaller catchments, but also in bigger catchments. However, it's very, very difficult, and there it comes the spatial planning factor into the discussion. It's very difficult to claim land that is really hardly needed to implement such measures, because you also need to have a kind of a construction to hold back the whole water. So I think the rethinking of spatial planning already started some 20 years ago. I mentioned the 2002 flood event, where we saw that environmental aspects together with flood protection aspects are not enough. So we saw and learned very hardly that that the behavior of us all has also a significant impact in reducing the overall flood risk. So if you know where the inundation area will be, if you avoid settling there, that's the best way to not even have flood risk there. So you see, it's so many bits and pieces that have impact on our overall goal of reducing flood risk. And I think the first important steps in rethinking the whole process had been made by implementing the EU Floods Directive. I hope that answers the question in some way.
Thank you, Humphrey. And maybe I there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions for Humphrey. And let me just pick one. A little bit about the resettlement. Maybe you can talk about sort of how do you do the resettlement? How do you engage the sort of communities in terms of the resettlement process.
Yeah, thank you very much. So with regard to resettlement, first of all, we established committees within the communities that will be managing some of the resettlement related complaints and so forth within the communities. But we have had several meetings with the communities from the awareness. We started with the awareness of the project, the importance. We had all the leaders, all the stakeholders within the area, starting from upstream down to downstream. All these people were very much engaged in the process. And therefore, we did the evaluation of their properties, and we have compensated almost all of them except 66. And how we did it, we gave them an options to whether to stay within the same area, but stay in the affordable houses. You know, like we had a plan of constructing houses within the same area, like we call it in situ in-kind compensation. And we gave them options whether to stay there or to be compensated cash. Most of them, more than 2,700, opted the cash compensation. But then we also searched for different locations within the city where they can get the cheapest land plots, like land spaces or areas that they can construct their new houses. And we have given them we have, during our research, we found that there is a minimum of 4 million Tanzanian shillings, which is equivalent to around say $2,000, where there is land available in those areas. And most of them took the money, but really they didn't go there. And what we observed as well, because of the flooding, more than 50% or 60% of the people within that flooding area, they are not really living in the area. They just rented. They built the area, they built their houses and live somewhere else. But those who were the tenants, we had to compensate them 3 months of the rents so that they go nearby areas to rent other houses. So we have compensated, and they are all very happy with what we have, except very few who had some family challenges or legal challenges. But otherwise, all the people who had no legal or family challenges accepted the money, and they are all very happy with the compensation that they have got.
Thanks, Humphrey. This next question is for all three speakers, so I'm going to give the floor to each of you to respond to this. But when thinking about the cost of interventions, operations, as well as maintenance in terms of what you've presented today, are there estimates on the cost benefit on these investments? Anna, maybe we'll start with you.
Wow, that's a difficult question because there is not a standard number that we use for this. But one of the things that this is not only about the economical benefits, it's the social benefits. And since we are most of the time dealing with informal settlements, and so in that sense, it's not only the economic benefit that you have to put in the question, but you have to put in place how many people is benefiting from the interventions and how many people were translating or putting in safe conditions to make this is a public good, so we have to have a decision that really benefits most. So in that sense, I don't have a number, or I don't have a specific answer for that, because there are many variables in the question.
Thanks, Anna. Clemens?
Yes, cost-benefit analysis is an integral part of implementing measures in Austria. However, in the end, there is always given priority to ecologic-oriented measures. So we have a limited budget, and this is spent as much as possible when the benefit cost ratio is in the range of 1 or higher on environmental-oriented measures. Just to give you a number, we invest in Austria roughly 400 million euros a year, and 20% out of that are therefore maintenance costs of the existing infrastructure to protect against floods.
Thanks, Clemens. Humphrey?
Yeah, for us, we have done some initial cost and benefit analysis, and we are having around US dollars 765 million as benefits by avoiding traffic disruptions, avoiding damages to buildings, avoiding damages to infrastructure, avoiding economic losses, and avoiding losses of life, but also public benefits on the park and surrounding area, but also land redevelopment revenues. They all come up into around 760 million US dollars, while the project cost is around US dollars 277 million. So for us, this is a straightforward project, having all the benefits calculated. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to Anna, Clemens, and Humphrey. I think this is an important question. Actually, I have seen a lot of projects that have used a lot of capital investments, but operations maintenance, lack of operation maintenance actually undermine the impact of these projects over longer term, which is really important. Overall, I feel this is a really helpful session. I'm very glad actually that we have experience from different countries, from Austria, from Tanzania, and some global experiences. One thing I also want to highlight, one takeaway, is the flood risk management. It's not just a technical issue. It's linked really to the socio-economic development of the whole city. It's about the human settlement. How do we plan the city together with nature, especially with water? And I think one of the questions about the informal settlement is also really keep in mind that people, mostly importantly, quite a lot of the biggest impact on flood is actually usually are the more vulnerable population. And they are, in a way, forced to live in areas that are flooding because in some way, it's because of lack of affordable housing and other options. So I think to address the flood problem, looking at the broader socio-economic side, from planning, jobs, affordable housing, these are the things that are also closely linked with that. So that's a little bit of observation from my side. With that, let me pass over to Lynette.
Thanks, Ming. Well, big thank you to all our panelists and audience for joining us today. So please watch our website, of course, for the session recording as well as the summary that we'll produce shortly after. And stay tuned for our next session, Breaking Down Risk in a Changing Climate, happening next Wednesday, 30th of October, in partnership with Zurich North America. So thank you, everyone, wherever you're connecting from, and have a wonderful day or evening.